Family hails from Tennessee, bunch of hicks and rednecks, full of crazy superstitions. One of them is about a glade in the woods, where trees have faces. The legend is that if you accidentally wander into this glade, the trees will take you. People have apparently been known to disappear there. My own personal story. Cousin and I go fishing in the woods. I'm about 12, he's 15. Cousin mentions the killer glade. I've heard of it but never seen it. He wants to show it to me, but says we shouldn't under any circumstances set foot in it. He kinda laughs about it, but I can tell he's serious. We walk right up to the glade without going inside. Sure enough, there's a circle of trees with heavily gnarled trunks. Especially the bottom parts of the trees. The boles are very twisted. They do look like melted faces. There's 8 of them all together. I remember because cousin says, don't get too close. You don't want to be number 9. Fast forward, years later, fishing with cousin again. Apparently a couple of kids disappeared in the forest recently. The killer glade naturally comes up. We decide to check it out. There are 10 faces now. Cousin looks spooked. We both race out of there like scared little kids. We must have miscounted the faces the first time, or who the fuck knows. Maybe the trees took the kids. I used to work in the gas industry as a geologist. From 2007 to 2009, I was on a contract with a Russian company called North Gas. Back when industrial relations with the UK were still fairly cordial, there was lots of potential gas sites in the Siberian region, far up north. I used to go around potential sites with company borehole engineers, usually in groups of 2 to 3. Anyways, I was at one site in northern Siberia with a German engineer in late October of 2008. Took ages to get to and completely devoid of human habitation, but really beautiful taiga. Endless forest on the drive up there. You drove a van through taiga? Yeah, I'm not a car nut, but it was some modified Jeep that the engineer guy would just not shut the fuck up about. Anyway, the site we went to survey was fairly typical of what you expect in the industry at these sort of locations. Then topsoil giving away to permeable slitstone. Excellent location for surveying. Now to the story. We come to a location where satellite imagery was suggesting that permafrost was retreating. It still fucking snows and ices over, of course. But the key point is that it's not entirely frozen over. We can install stuff during the summer months, get gas production up. It was a pretty boring landscape though, very thin topsoil giving way rapidly to permeable slitstone. Lots of these natural holes all over the place too. Permafrost plugs that have melted and left 20 to 30 meter deep holes dotted all over the place. We decided to stay a few weeks and do some test surveys. First week was completely fine, got some good location, things progressing smoothly. By the end of the week though, things were getting a little weird. Every time I would go out with the spectrometer after the first week, I'd occasionally hear some noises from the holes. I was never near them because when you get a lot of gas coming off those things, they're not a terribly good idea for industrial drilling. It was faint, just on the border of hearing. I never knew how to describe those noises until a few years later, when someone took me out to a jazz bar and some guy was playing a violin like an instrument that makes this drone noise, like a disconcerting, as in this job. You're not really working together, both apart, so the two of us were hearing stuff out there. We were both rational people, at the time for me at least, so we put it down to cave noises. Laugh, forget it. About 10 days into this survey, it started happening at night. Again, faint, but really ominous. That drone noise. We used to sleep in the back of the van we had brought, but even through those doors we heard it. Again, stop being stupid. It's cave noises. Laugh, have a few beers, go to sleep. It got worse from there. The day after, I found some slime stuff around one of the permafrost boreholes. Yeah, you get lichens and mosses around these things, not an issue. But this was like petroleum jelly, that really viscous stuff. I touched it and immediately regretted it. It felt a lot like pork belly fat. It was warm too, which was really disturbing considering it was -5 degrees Celsius. During the day out there, bring around the German engineer to take a look. He looks troubled. For the rest of the day, I was constantly on edge too. I kept looking back at the borehole too, just to check. I kept saying to myself, things got worse at night. The drone noise got a lot worse. But it felt, and I know this is a shit way of putting it, like it wasn't from below, but above on the surface. My German engineer tried to laugh it off, but I could tell he was seriously disturbed by it. Just a low phone. Eventually, we get to sleep. God knows how many hours later though, we wake up together because there is definitely something attempting to open the door handle to the passenger seat of the van. Click, click, click. And now the drone is right fucking outside. And it sounds a lot like gurgling. At this point, we both freak the fuck out and scream like a pair of little girls. It stops. We don't sleep for the rest of the night, and it doesn't come back. Next day, as soon as we make it 9 a.m., we cautiously open the doors. The entire back door is covered in this pork fat shit. The place reeks of something rotten too. Passenger door just smeared in the stuff, but the thing that made us immediately go, fuck it, we're leaving, was the passenger window, which was also smeared in the skunk, had an outline on it. Like something had pressed its skull into the fat stuff and left an outline. It was unmistakable, some elongated human skull with no eye orbitals. Jelly stuff was all over the area around us too, and a fucking course led all the way to that borehole. We get out of there very fast after that, but as we were packing, that drone shit started again from that hole, and it was loud. It was guttural by this point. Whatever the shit was making it was down there and close too. German guy went pretty nuts after that, just hopped in, immediately started going. Equipment that was still out for methane measurements just left. Didn't stop driving for the next 14 hours. I pretty much ditched my job soon after. I had no desire to be left like that in the middle of places like that. German guy, never heard from him again. He never talked about it to me anyway. Nice story, thanks for posting. Thanks, I suppose. I guess distance from the event makes it sound pretty prosaic. Spooky noises, ooh, slime, ooh. During the night though, I was convinced I was gonna die. You know how you can just know when someone or something like an animal is nice, curious, or is just out to fuck you up? I knew instinctively that whatever wanted in didn't want to crack open a beer and ask us about geology, if you get my drift. Anyway, I spent a long time after I had calmed down about it, which took a few months in fact, to think of a rational reason for this. Every time though, I kept butting up against the inexplainable. Sure, drone could have been cave noises, but the warm slime stuff? The guttural noises? Around 2012, I got a lot into reading about frozen mammoths, and the worry about viruses from the taiga that they were expecting because of climate change. And at that point, I went full X and said fuck it. Frozen monster. I'm gonna dump one of my stories for y'all. I'll leave it up to you to believe it or not, after your own mind, but for me, this was the biggest nope moment I've had. Some background first. This happened in Boden, Sweden, a couple of years back. Boden is known for one thing, and one thing only: military forts. It was long thought of as the key to northern Sweden, the first thing the Soviets would raffle stomp if they ever came charging. Those forts were secret as fuck in the past, and for some time one of the forts were used to store a large part of Sweden's gold reserve. However, after the Cold War ended, the forts became even more obsolete than before and were decommissioned. Anyway, the story. B21. Hang out with female friend that's more like a sister I never had. We are both scouts and have been for as long as we both can remember. Bored as fuck. Decide to go recon a cool campsite for coming Halloween scare hike. My friend, let's call her H, knows a lot of cool old forts and trench systems. Drive off in my car, which was perfectly fine and had gone through inspection without a hitch only a week before. Decide to check out the nearest old fort. Parked the car a couple 100 meters from the old fort because someone had placed big ass stones as a crude roadblock on the dirt road leading to the fort. The fort is dug like Pick related, with the exception that only there is no road up to the fort. Pick is another fort near Boden. Walk/climb up to the fort from the right slope that's somewhat accessible. Any thoughts of recon for a campsite have soon been replaced by thoughts of exploration. It's about midday, but the daylight is waning fast due to northern Sweden. Luckily, we brought flashlights. Eventually locate a hole in the fence big enough for us to get through. Explore a bit, though all the doors are locked, either with massive padlocks or internal locks. Start to head back the way we came in. A thick door that we both were sure had been closed before is now slightly ajar. Not by much, just a couple of centimeters. We haven't heard any door opening or anyone else being here. This door is about 1.5 meters wide, 2.5 meters tall, and made entirely of 1 decimeter of solid steel. And on rusty hinges, it looks like. Remember that H told me before that local wildlife seems to shun this place. Okay, getting a real bad feeling about this right now. We both keep our distance, but our curiosity gets the better of us. We both try peeking inside. Pitch fucking dark inside. Except, I sense something move inside. Don't really know how I know this, but I just get this very weird feeling, like someone is staring at us from inside. We both aim our flashlights and thumb them on. Flashlights both give a short burst of light, then go dead as doorknobs. We put in new batteries before we went out. In the short picosecond we had light, I managed to get a glimpse of something. A gray, blackish humanoid shape that looks more like a beast than a man. At the same time, something in my mind pushes the primal predator panic button. Nope, nope, nope. I'm not sure what H saw, but she is white as a fucking sheet, and as damn near panic as I've ever seen her. We both scramble out without saying a word to each other. We both must have broken the record on 200-meter panic sprint. Don't know about H, but I felt something. Can't describe it, more than a terrible sense of hate following us. Get in the car. I turn the key. Nothing. Try to turn it again. The car won't start. The headlight won't even turn on. Eventually, after turning the key frantically again and again for the longest 2 minutes in my life, the car starts. We get the hell out of Dodge with gravel flying everywhere as I floor it until we get back to the main road. Later learned through other friends that there have been other similar occurrences there. Some hearing a faint but very much mocking laughter coming from beyond that door, and others feeling watched when they are near the fort. The door has never been ajar before or after though, and it has always been locked when anyone has tried to open it. Okay, I normally don't post, just lurk, but whatever, here's my only spooky experience. Just some backdrop. I live in the Upper Peninsula by the Porcupine Mountains. On K, we have this thing called Stalker Challenge, where we LARP as characters from Stalker and go in the woods for some fun. You normally go to abandoned places, but it's not like you need to if there are none available. Lucky for me, there's a bunch of old abandoned cabins in the park that not a lot of people know about. Well, that's all for background. Here's my story. Be me, 19-year-old stalker. Plan to go deep into the park and find new spots that have not been disturbed yet. Stalking buddy has work, so I decided to go alone. This was my first mistake. I bike all the way to the trailhead, as I've done countless times before. Stashed my bike in the regular spot so no one would steal it. Brought 3 24-hour rations and some vodka with me for food. Bring my FAL because I don't fuck with bears, wolves, and especially mountain lions. Mountain lions were always my #1 fear when going in the woods. I've been stalked by them plenty of times and I know how deadly they are. Start my normal hike through the woods. The trailhead is a popular one, so I get a lot of odd looks. But whatever, I'm cheeky breeky. Hike for the first day at a breakneck pace to get as far as I possibly can. Hike is fucking beautiful. If any of you guys ever want a great place to hike, here it is. When I set up camp, I'm tired as fuck, and don't even bother setting up a tent, just string up my tarp and pass out. Wake up next morning, pack my shit up, get ready to go further in. As I'm walking out, I notice some prints. It's a fucking lion. Mildly freak out as these prints are fresh. We're about 20 feet from where my exposed self was sleeping. I'm doing another fast-paced hike, but this time I'm always scanning the trees and have my FAL at the ready. Never saw that cat, but I was a bit jumpy from then on. To be fair, I think that cat saved my life. I eventually make it to the more unexplored parts of the forest. No trail, so I decided to make my own. I felt like Lewis and Clark. After a day of roughing it through the woods, I finally made a camp in a clearing. Super cool area. Rocks make a circle around the clearing, so I think there used to be a man-made structure here. Abandoned area equals stalker area. I dig myself a fire pit and use some of the rocks from the circle to make sure I don't burn the forest down. After I built a nice fire and ate some rancid MREs, I decided to pull out my travel guitar and play a few lines, thinking highly of myself due to how stalker I must be right now. Then I whiff an unholy smell. I think it might be one of the MRE wrappers that I had thrown in the fire at first, but the smell got progressively worse. I stopped playing and decided to find out where it's coming from. Can't find the source, so I put on my gas mask to mask the smell. When I'm putting on the mask, I heard the most ear-splitting sound. Imagine someone scratching a chalkboard with 1,000 knives. Shivers all the way down my spine. Spooked as fuck. Grabbed my FAO. Fuck, forgot to mention. I duct taped my flashlight to the handguard after the cat incident. I started scanning the tree line for anything that could have made that noise. Nothing moves. After scanning, I get a glimpse of a flash. 2 fucking eyes. They were about eye level to me. I'm 6'3". The second I put my light on them, they disappear. Mildly freaking out at this point. Fucker keeps coming in and out of the light, but I can't make out anything except the eyes. In my infinite wisdom, I decided I need to get a better position. Take out my BFB 500G smoke bomb. That I keep for a signal. Light that shit, and under the smoke screen, book it to the nearest tree. I'm scanning everywhere now, trying to get another look at whatever the fuck was out there. Next time I saw the eyes, I took a few shots at it. Never landed a shot. This went on for an hour, or at least it felt like that, until the eyes gathered more courage. It started to get closer and closer until it was at the base of my tree. I finally was able to get a better look. It looked like a giant lump of fur with no distinguishable features except its eyes. When the eyes looked up at me from the trunk, the loudest roar I have ever heard. It sounded like it was in pain. Thing disappeared for about an hour, and I started to think I was in the clear. Felt a flash of pain, and my vision turned white. The next thing I knew, I was getting dragged down from a tangle of branches by forest rangers and local cops. I had a major head wound. Dried blood matted my face and hair. Don't remember much of what happened as I got evac'd out of the woods. Next thing I know, I'm in the hospital. Cops say I was a victim of a bear attack after I told them what happened. Funny enough, the path I took led me about 5 miles from the ranger outpost. They heard my 7.62 going off and called for backup. Never got any charges for a minor having an illegal substance. Cops and rangers were just happy I was okay. Except for a concussion. Small towns are the best. Gave me a long safety talk about staying on the trails, going with a buddy, eating away from campsites, etc, etc. I still go back to the forest almost every weekend, but now I always bring a friend and a lot more ammunition. These are a series of stories largely based in the woods. So if it's not your cup of tea, move along. The first story is about the time I encountered a weird apparition in the woods near my house. For starters, a little background. I'm a military veteran, not US. Seen combat, trained information gatherer, and scout as well. Living in a somewhat forested area, pick related, is a mountain near my place. Have caught one too many tweakers using my property as a shortcut between their crack houses. Fuck that. Start doing semi-regular patrols around the property. One day, find an absolutely enormous old-growth softwood tree, easily 15 feet around the base. This is fucking massive. Notice that it offers good coverage / camouflage, as well as a view of the highway that the tweakers use. Keep this in mind for future excursions. Fast forward. One afternoon, patrolling, it's hot as shit. When I reach the enormous tree, I decide to take a break in the cool shade. Sit down at the base, lean back, take a swig from my canteen, close my eyes for a bit. The wind picks up, feels cold, unreasonably cold. Open my eyes, actually shivering from the unreasonable chill. Look right, and that's when I see it. Looks like a human silhouette, only it's floating 30 feet in the air. Transparent enough that I can see the adler trees behind it perfectly. Looks just like reality is embossed around the shape of this man-shaped outline, without legs. I can feel it staring at me, overcome with a slow creeping horror. Hard to explain, but I could feel like I was in this thing's home and I was not welcomed. I blink, hoping the thing will disappear. Blink some more. It's still there. Slowly, loop the shoulder strap of my backpack over my arm. Grab my rifle with my other hand. Quickly hop to my feet and take off running in the opposite direction from the floating thing. Wind kicks up just then again. Unnaturally cold. I'm in a 98-degree sunlight and it feels like a winter chill. Trees shake. Leaves fall all around me while I sprint through the swamp back to my familiar territory. Realize then, shit, I'm lost. This makes no sense. I ran in the direction I'd come from, into territory I cross all the time, but nothing looks familiar. Take cover behind a fallen tree and begin appraising the situation. I know the direction I came from, and I have a rough idea of where the main road is. Using that, and one of the nearby creeks, I managed to find a main trail. Still feeling watched though, and I still feel like I'm not welcome here. Hoof it down the trail. After about a quarter mile, I finally find my way back to my property. It took me a long time to return to this area. Between the sighting of that thing and getting lost in familiar terrain, I'm not afraid to admit I was genuinely terrified. Time passes. Eventually, I get the balls to return to the spot with a better plan. As soon as I arrive, the cold wind kicks up again. This time, I begin to pray. And using advice from some dumbass wannabe pagans I used to know, I audibly speak into the woods. Say that I have no idea what the thing I saw was, and that I have no quarrel with it. But it does not have the permission to follow me home. Never have any other experience in the area afterwards. Not sure what the apparition was, but the wannabe pagans I mentioned said it was a forest wight. Like a spirit that protects the forest in European myths, I guess. They suggested I leave an offering. Something without any artificial components, plastic, rubber, etc. I left a wooden figurine and a bagel once. Didn't do shit as far as I can tell. Continuing with a different sighting. This one involves a friend of mine too. We both saw this thing outside an old shack that belonged to this crazy dude we used to know. High school days. My hometown has a well-known resident schizo named Roy. In my parents' generation, Roy was a big deal. He was the first to bring our high school football team to state. Handsome, popular dude with no shortage of girlfriends, etc. All of that changed after his brother died in a murder disguised as a hunting accident. The suspect was another local schizo. This drove Roy into a long, unbelievably deep spiral that he never emerged from. Ended up diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Went off his meds every few months. When he did, he'd often attack the asphalt road in front of his shack with a pickaxe. He did this while screaming that there was a secret underground tunnel that ran under his property. Said the zippers used it to steal stuff from his house and then escape undetected into the woods. He called these mysterious thieves the zippers because of their speed. They'd zip in and out without being seen. Roy was eventually banned from any public space in town for his panhandling and threats to people who questioned him. Roy was fond of my family though. He told me we had good aura, but probably was just because we actually treated him with respect. Plus, my parents were friends of his before his episodes ever started. Interesting note, Roy could, upon request, immediately recite all the numbers off the plate of any telephone pole in the town. He also claimed repeatedly that he was a reincarnated soldier from the Union Army called Robert G. Stebben, Stebben. Anyways, my family would often deliver fresh water to him in gallon jugs. On one visit, he offered to show me the room where he said he spoke with Satan on a nightly basis. I politely declined. On this particular visit, Roy had torn up all the flooring from his 2-room shack in order to expose the hidden tunnel network underground, the one the zippers supposedly used. He had tossed all the wood into a heap and set it ablaze in a bonfire. That's when my friend and I saw what we saw. I was making the weekly delivery of water jugs, and had my good friend with me. Being off his meds made Roy a serious talker. He'd jabber on for hours with his delusional ramblings, so my friend and I sat politely, half listening to what Roy was saying. When I looked past Roy's shack and saw something in the woods behind him, the basic description is this. It was humanoid, stood about 1.5 times taller than the average man, but about half as wide, tall, skinny fucker, covered in shaggy black hair. It was there for a moment, before bounding away into the brush. Bipedal, seemed to look back over its shoulder at us as it left, moved much faster than any person could in these thick woods. Since I was kinda daydreaming while listening to Roy's ramblings, I kinda thought it might be imagining things. The sun goes down too, but my friend tugs at my sleeve and says, "Did you see that?" It was a long, silent, intense car ride home. We didn't talk about it till we were back and safe. I gathered that my friend really only saw the thing after it moved, whereas I got a better look at it. We discussed what it logically could have been, till we decided it didn't fit any logical explanation we could think of. Kinda just dropped it after that. Roy died a few years ago after letting some tweakers move in with him. Now his old hut has been demolished. The road leading to it as of now has been left intentionally blocked. Several fallen trees and abandoned cars will impede your path if you try to drive down that road. Pig related is a random pig from the general area. Sasquatch story. This one comes from a friend. Friend has a weekly routine which he almost never deviates from. Sundays are for horseback riding. Introspective time. Out alone, riding his horse as long as he wishes, with a backpack full of food and drinks. Done it a million times in the past. just him and his horse in the mountains, exploring lakes and riverbeds around there. Needless to say, he and his horse have a special bond. One morning, Friend saddles up, kisses his wife goodbye, and goes out riding like usual. Heads up the mountain, pick related, intending to find a nice vantage point, hitch his horse, and take in the view. A few hours riding and he comes across a part of the woods he's not visited before. There's a small ravine there. Friend crosses, then begins ascending the slope, but his horse bucks him off without warning, sending him tumbling down to the creek at the bottom. At the same moment, an awful, sickening, rotten stench surrounds him. He hears crashing sounds and other loud noises out of the view, over the crest of the hill. Horse panics and flees, leaving him alone. Now there he is, ass in the creek, with some beast or whatever it is somewhere above him. His only protection is a fixed blade knife and a backpack full of expired canned soup and Vienna sausages. Something begins lobbing tree limbs and large rocks over the edge at him. When he finally regains his senses, he gets to his feet, runs in the same direction his horse did, though unfamiliar terrain, with the same crashing noises right behind him the whole time, like whatever it is chasing him. He continues running as fast as he can, up and down through the gullies, over rocks, between the trees, till he feels like he might collapse. Breathing is growing short, aches in his sides. Right when exhaustion is creeping up on him, everything goes silent. He looks around and finds that he's back at the trailhead. His horse is nervously milling about, and my friend's pursuer is nowhere to be seen. Feeling fortunate, he hops back on the horse and heads home early. Hasn't ever been back to that side of the mountain since. He isn't the only person to have had that experience on the mountain though. Just a few months ago, during the company employee appreciation picnic, somebody's rat dog goes missing. It's found a few days later, eviscerated. Another lady told me that while camping there with her family, something huge and bipedal was circling the campsite, staying just out of the fire's light. I've been there myself, never experienced anything spooky, but I did return with several pictures of the beautiful scenery. Going to share how Roy's brother was killed, because it sort of ties into another story I remember about a haunted gun. But first, the murder. I'm just gonna go ahead and name the perpetrator here because he's a psycho and fuck him. His name's Lane. Lane was something of a local celebrity in my town, for all the wrong reasons. This dude was just as crazy as Roy would later become, only Lane was actually violent. This dude was a menace and everyone knew it. Then around 1978 or 79, Lane suddenly decided he didn't like Roy's brother. Nobody knows why. Roy's brother was friendly, extroverted, just a solid guy all around. Such a decent guy in fact, that when Lane asked him to go out hunting, Roy's brother didn't question it. He just packed up his gear, hopped in Lane's truck, and the two of them disappeared up the mountain. But only one came back. Long story short, Lane claimed the death was a hunting accident, and there was not enough evidence to say otherwise. Although I personally believe, just as everyone else did, that Lane took Roy's brother hunting with the intent to kill him. The gun Lane used was a Winchester. To be exact, it was a Winchester model 1892, in .45 long, with an octagonal barrel, 20 inches, or maybe the next size up, plain blued finish, minimal checkering on handguard and butt, Lyman peep sight added to the receiver. This was the weapon that murdered Roy's brother, and maybe because of this, the gun was believed to be haunted. After the hunting incident, Lane kept mostly to himself, but he managed to sell the murder weapon, and it changed hands a few times. Then in 2015, a shooting buddy of mine invited me over to his place for some movies and gun talk. During the course of that, my buddy asked if I wanted to see something weird, and took me to his gun safe, and there it was, the Winchester. Now, all my buddy knew was that the gun was a beautiful gun, which could have been a museum piece, on the cheap off some dumb drunk at a yard sale. He knew nothing about Lane and Roy, or the murder. So, why did he call it weird? Well, according to him, he thought the gun was sort of bad luck. Apparently just after purchasing the gun, he had a series of accidents. After each accident, he noticed the connection between his accidents and his use of the Winchester. There was even major damage to his property from a freak windstorm, and he thought it was because of the gun. As a result, he always made sure to keep the rifle in perfect condition and always locked in the safe. After telling me this, he asked me if I wanted to hold it. LOL. I did, of course. Now the movie was still on the TV this entire time, but when I shouldered the gun, the TV suddenly went to static. My buddy looked from me to the TV, back to me, then took the gun, and carefully placed it back in the safe. As soon as he took the rifle from me, the TV went back to normal. That's basically my own little experience with it. Although there's one little detail I didn't tell my buddy. I have tons of war trophies in my collection, all with grisly histories. I even fired an Arisaka Type 99, but I never got the feeling I got when I held that Winchester. It's impossible to describe, other than say it was giving me an ominous feeling, like a darkness hung over me while I held it. So as much as I love classic rifles, I'm glad it's back in my hometown, and 1,400 miles away from me.